Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Dr. Alan Smith, bringing you important information on the New King James translation of the Bible. You know, the Bible is no ordinary book. It is not a human book. The Bible is God's inspired and infallible word. Simply put, it is God's book. It is the book which God has given to His people to teach them the truth which they must believe and the godly life which they must live. That is why the Bible is so very important for every believer. Without the Holy Scriptures, the believer has no Word of God. He has no standard of what is the truth and what is a lie, what is righteous and what is wicked. It is therefore imperative that every child of God takes great care that the Bible version which he uses, which he defends, which he promotes in this world, is a faithful translation of the Word of God. On this point, however, there is much confusion. There are many versions available today. And they are all promoted as the best. Some are advertised as the most accurate. Others are advanced as the easiest to understand. All of them are justified by the supposed inferiority of the King James Version. I'll be right back with this important information about the New King James Version. What is wrong with the New King James Version? The New King James is not a King James Bible. It changed thousands of words. It ruined valuable verses. And when not agreeing with the King James Bible, it has instead copied the perverted NIV, NASV, or RSV. And this you must know. Those who translated the NKJV did not believe God's perfectly, or that is, that God has perfectly preserved His Word. This is very important to those who want God's truth in the English language. Here is some of what convinced me to cling to the King James Bible instead of turning to the New King James Bible. Reason number one. Changed words means changed meanings. We know that Bible versions disagree on how to translate certain words. Here is an example of some of the changes made by the New King James Bible. Is Jesus God's son or God's servant? In Acts 3, verse 26, the New King James Version calls Jesus God's servant. The KJV, or the King James Version, the authorized version, correctly calls him God's son. These are not the same by any stretch of the imagination. Which one is he? If he is God's servant, so are you and I. If he is God's son, then we all need to listen to what he said because he is God. Changed words like this make a great deal of difference in how we understand a passage of the Bible. Please decide what God is saying to Moses in Exodus chapter 16. In the New King James Version, it looks like God is saying, Moses, you are continuing to refuse to keep my commandments and my laws. But look closely at the accurate King James Version. Now we understand. It was the people, not Moses, that God was upset with. Ye and you mean more than one person. Thee, thou, thy, thine, doeth, hast, etc. only mean one person. How do we know? The Y is plural. The T is singular. Isn't that easy? Now you know what Jesus meant when he said to Nicodemus, marvel not that I said unto thee, ye must be born again, in John chapter 3, verse 7. What Jesus said was, Nicodemus, marvel not that I said unto thee, all of you need to be born again. This is very important. Not only Nicodemus needed to be saved, but everybody, including him, needed to be born again. That's why Jesus used the plural. But there is more of a problem than the thousands of times thee and thou are removed from God's words. What does a word mean? This is very important, as you shall see. Look at the word Gehenna. Gehenna. The New King James Version claims to be more accurate because it leaves untranslated words like Gehenna, Hades, and Sheol. What do they mean? You will know from the Authorized King James Version. The exact meaning is hell, Hell. We know what that means. Meaning is very important. When's the last time you heard someone told to go to Gehenna. Which is correct? The New King James Version consistently uses terms that don't mean the same as in the King James Bible. Here are some examples.
Changed from corrupt the Word of God to peddling the Word of God? There is a big difference between a heretic and a divisive man. There is a big difference between all appearance of evil and every form of evil. In this sample, the King James Version mentions the second coming of the Lord, but the New King James Version does not mention it at all.
Both translations cannot be correct. If one is right, the other has to be wrong. No matter how you slice it, the New King James Version does not have the same meaning as the accurate King James Bible. Reason number 2, changed affections. There's a lot of evidence that the translators and publishers did not believe God preserved His Word. Number 1, Thomas Nelson Publishers. The New King James Version was translated and is printed under the watchful eye of Thomas Nelson Publishers. Here's part of a timeline they published. 1969, Sam Moore purchased Thomas Nelson Publishers, vowing to return it to its once proud place among the leading publishers of the world. 1976, Nelson initiates the creation of a new Bible translation, the New King James Version. 1980s, Nelson reclaims its place as a premier publisher of Bibles and Christian books, expanding into international markets, and establishes markets as Nelson's gift division. It is clear that the New King James Version made Thomas Nelson Publishers a lot of money. Did a King James type Bible renew their hearts to God? Note the following facts. They are also the publishers of the American Standard Version, the American revision of Westcott and Hort's Perverted English Revised Version. They are also the publishers of the Revised Standard Version, the revision of the American Standard Version. To this day, they continue to sell at least 6 Bible perversions. Think about that. The NKJV was just one moneymaker that helped Nelson reclaim its place as a major publisher. The New King James Version repeats the lie that there is only one basic New Testament used by Protestant, Roman Catholics, and Orthodox, by conservatives and liberals. In fact, there are two. The perverted Alexandrian line that was continued by the Roman Catholic religion, and the preserved apostolic Antiochian line that progresses from the Christians at Antioch of Syria. Look at Acts chapter 11, verse 26, to our precious King James Bible. Number two, the New King James translators. Marion H. Reynolds, Jr., of the Fundamental Evangelistic Association reveals a little-known fact. Quoting, "The duplicity of the New King James Version scholars is also a matter for concern. Although each scholar was asked to subscribe to a statement confirming his belief in the plenary, divine verbal inspiration of the original autographs," now, end quote, "none of which exists today," unquote. The question of whether or not they also believed in the divine preservation of the divinely inspired originals was not an issue as it should have been. Dr. Arthur Farstad, chairman of the New King James Executive Review Committee, which had the responsibility of the final text approval, stated that this committee was about equally divided as to which was the better Greek New Testament text, the Textus Recepticus or the Westcott Hort. Apparently none of them believed that either text was the divinely preserved Word of God. Yet all of them participated in a project to protect and preserve the purity and accuracy of the original King James Version based on the Textus Recepticus. Is not this duplicity of the worst kind coming from supposedly evangelical scholars? Unquote. Not the real thing. What Mr. Reynolds points out is very important to understand. There were basically two groups of translators working on the New King James Version. One half believed that the perverted 45 Alexandrian manuscripts from which came the Roman Catholic Bibles and the modern perversions were better than the manuscripts behind the King James Bible. The other group believed the thousands of manuscripts supporting the King James were better. This is a big problem. No one believed that they held God's words in their hands. Only a better or worse text. The translators believed they had something close, but not an accurate Bible. It is a sad thing when a Bible translator doesn't even believe he has God's words in his hands. It sounds like they don't believe God kept his promise. How sad.
In Mark chapter 13, verse 31, Jesus declares, "Heaven and earth shall pass away, but my words shall not pass away."
Perhaps that is why some of them had no problem working on other perversions, both before and after working on the New King James Version. This is so unlike the 54 plus Bible men who faithfully translated the King James Bible from preserved manuscripts of God's words. The difference between the King James and the New King James is the difference between day and night. Compromising God's words. Many Christians are discovering the miracle of God's words in English. But the enemy has tried to insert a monkey wrench, the New King James Version. Pastors approve it, scholars promote it, but the New King James Version is a wolf in sheep's clothing. The New King James Version is just a compromise between the liberal, perverted Bible versions floating around and the rock-solid, accurate, and preserved words of God found in the King James Bible. Brothers and sisters, don't settle for anything less than God's words. Now be sure to watch for what is wrong with the American Standard Version of the Bible, which will be available next Wednesday.